Standing up for your freedom from an evil and oppressive regime.
The long-standing tension between Israel and Iran has evolved into one of the most dangerous flashpoints in global geopolitics. At the heart of this volatile standoff lies a complex web of ideological, strategic, and military rivalries. But as tensions continue to escalate, the United States finds itself in a precarious position, deeply entangled in a conflict where its alliances, military commitments, and global image are at stake. The potential for direct or indirect confrontation grows with every missile fired, every covert strike, and every provocative statement. For the United States, the Israel-Iran conflict represents not only a regional challenge, but a significant risk to its broader strategic interests and national security. A delicate alliance with Israel. The U.S.-Israel alliance is one of the most enduring partnerships in American foreign policy. Rooted in shared democratic values and robust military cooperation, this relationship has transcended political administrations. Washington provides Israel with billions of dollars annually in military aid, advanced weapons systems, and diplomatic support on the world stage. However, this unwavering commitment to Israel places the U.S. in a complicated position when Israel takes aggressive actions against Iran, such as targeted strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities or operations against Iranian proxies in Syria and Lebanon. While the U.S. may not directly authorize these operations, it is often seen globally, particularly in the Muslim world, as complicit. This perception can have profound consequences, potentially making American assets and personnel in the Middle East targets for retaliation by Iran or its proxies. The Iranian threat and U.S. security interests. Iran is not only a regional adversary of Israel, but also a nation with long-standing hostility toward the United States, dating back to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The Great Satan rhetoric persists, and Iranian-backed groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and various Shiite militias in Iraq have launched attacks against U.S. forces and interests. In the context of rising Israel-Iran tensions, any military engagement, especially one that escalates into full-scale conflict, could draw the U.S. into direct confrontation with Iran. American bases across the Gulf, naval fleets in the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, and diplomatic missions are all within range of Iran's ballistic missiles and drone capabilities. Moreover, Iranian cyber warfare units have shown an increasing capacity to target critical infrastructure, potentially extending the battlefield far beyond the Middle East. Regional destabilization and diplomatic fallout. Another significant risk for the United States lies in regional destabilization. The Middle East is a fragile geopolitical landscape, and open conflict between Israel and Iran could ignite sectarian and national rivalries across the region. Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon could become battlefields for proxy wars, dragging in not only the U.S., but also global powers like Russia and China. Furthermore, America's Arab allies, particularly Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan, would be forced to navigate an increasingly volatile environment. Many of these nations have recently normalized relations with Israel or have quietly improved ties under the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords. But if Israel launches a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, these Arab governments may face internal unrest and regional backlash. The U.S. could be blamed for encouraging or failing to prevent the escalation. The nuclear question. Iran's nuclear ambitions have long been at the center of the conflict. While Iran insists its program is for peaceful purposes, Israel, and much of the Western world, believes otherwise. The U.S. previously led the negotiation of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, which limited Iran's nuclear development in exchange for sanctions relief. However, the Trump administration's unilateral withdrawal from the deal in 2018 significantly heightened tensions, with Iran subsequently resuming enrichment activities. Should Israel act unilaterally to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, as it did in Iraq, 1981, and Syria, 2007, the consequences could be catastrophic. Iran would almost certainly retaliate, and the likelihood of war involving U.S. military forces would skyrocket. Moreover, such an escalation could prompt Iran to accelerate its nuclear program, viewing a weapon as the only deterrent against regime change. Domestic political divides. America's involvement in the Israel-Iran conflict also carries serious domestic political risks. Public opinion in the U.S. is divided over how much support should be extended to Israel, especially when civilian casualties mount, or when the conflict is perceived as unjustified. While strong bipartisan support for Israel exists in Congress, younger and more progressive segments of the population and some lawmakers have expressed increasing concern about the human cost of America's Middle East policies. A protracted military entanglement, or the perception of one-sided support for Israeli military action, could deepen political polarization within the U.S., complicating foreign policy consensus and eroding trust in the government's handling of international crises. Economic risks and energy markets. Even if the U.S. avoids direct military involvement, a major regional war would send shockwaves through global markets. Iran has threatened in the past to close the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which 1/5 of the world's oil supply flows. Any disruption here could cause a dramatic spike in global energy prices, triggering inflationary pressures and economic instability in the U.S. and beyond. Furthermore, a wider war would negatively affect investor confidence, strain global supply chains, and potentially destabilize already fragile economies in Europe and Asia, complicating America's efforts to maintain global economic leadership and security. Strategic focus: the China and Russia factor. Another underappreciated risk is strategic distraction. As the U.S. seeks to pivot toward countering China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific and managing its strained relations with Russia, a major conflict in the Middle East could divert attention, troops, and resources. Iran and its allies may even see this as an opportunity to coordinate with Moscow and Beijing in undermining U.S. influence. A multi-front geopolitical challenge, with Iran in the Middle East, Russia in Eastern Europe, and China in the Pacific, would stretch American capabilities and test its alliances like never before. Maintaining deterrence and credibility across such a wide spectrum of threats is a daunting task that could be severely undermined by a prolonged Israel-Iran conflict. Conclusion: a calculated balancing act. The U.S. must tread carefully in navigating the Israel-Iran conflict. It faces the difficult task of supporting an ally in Israel while preventing a full-scale war that could destabilize the region and draw America into another costly and prolonged military engagement. Strategic diplomacy, pressure on both parties to de-escalate, and a renewed commitment to nuclear non-proliferation are essential. Ultimately, the risks for the United States are profound: militarily, diplomatically, economically, and politically. Avoiding a direct confrontation, limiting regional fallout, and safeguarding U.S. national interests will require not just military strength, but strategic foresight and careful diplomacy.